Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, what the hell is it? It's Tuesday. Hooray! Huzzah for Tuesday. I'm confused because it's Tuesday and we're not on the brink of a government shutdown. But, you know, that's the usual routine. We check in. This is how we know it's a Tuesday. There's some reference to government shutdown, but we're waiting until the next one. But we're creeping ever closer. Tuesday, January 30th, 2024. Time for another discussion of government shutdowns, as we would say on a Tuesday. Second to last day of January, which means we're going to have to, we'll connect it to the shutdown for you, which means it's almost February. February is the shortest month, which means it's really basically almost March and basically, spring break. All right. See you later, everybody. Woohoo. In March, early March is where we've kicked the can to for government shutdowns again. I don't know whether we'll go through the same thing again or not. I assume so. But we do have this month to do Tuesdays about something else, which means Joan McCarter gets to do whatever she wants. How about that? Can't ask for a better assignment than that. We'll just see what's on Joan's mind these days. Of course, if you're keeping up with her reading as senior political writer at Daily Kos, do we still use titles like that? And of course, it's not we anymore. It's they. But does she still use that title? That's a good question. I haven't checked on that like in 100 years, but. Well, it does occur to me, we have such a tight, closed circle of listeners here, I think everybody knows who Joan McCarter is. And we don't do the regular radio station thing. Joining us now on our line is Joan McCarter, senior political writer for Daily Kos. That's dailykos.com. We haven't done that in quite a while, and maybe we've never done that. And that's okay. We can deviate from the norm from time to time, and we just keep it in the family here. Everybody knows Joan, and there you go. We were just happy to hear from her, and that's the end of it. Okay, lots to catch up with, as usual. Some of it not necessarily about how terrible Donald Trump is, but a lot of it is about that guy, because he's awful. Let's see. I don't have any particular order in which I wanted to take things on today, and no dominant, standout social media story of the day, as far as I can tell. Everybody's sort of all over the map and just sort of, trying to figure out what's up today. Let's see what's going on here. I'll scan to see if there's anything else happening here that we ought to be on top of. Okay, no. The end. All right, so we'll go over to Pocket and we'll do maybe a couple of stories, maybe a lightning round. I don't even know if there's enough for a lightning round. There's a couple of stories we're going to have to reveal to ourselves, which are hidden behind the weird tiles of Pocket that don't tell us anything about it except that it was marked in one or another of the social media platforms. Lauren Boebert, I don't know. She just jumps to the top on this one. I think she got a mention yesterday because the weirdo who was organizing the the reverse caravan in the border, the north to south border caravan full of yahoos, headed to the border. It looked a little bit, it was reminiscent of Lauren Boebert. Let's see. She, as we know, decided not to run for re-election in Colorado's 3rd district, but rather in Colorado's 4th district, which kind of, sort of, in some places, as I recall looking at the map, kind of, sort of borders the 3rd district, but it's not, a close next door neighbor like you might expect. But I guess because of the weirdness of the way the districts are drawn, there is some abutment. Anyway, a more conservative district, as it turns out. And anyhow, she threw her hat in the ring, or wig in the ring. I don't know what she's wearing these days. And they had a debate. And the New Republic says, or specifically, if I open up the article here, maybe my computer will one day tell me yes. Who wrote the piece? Tori Otten is the writer of this piece from the end of last week. Lauren Boebert's first debate went as spectacularly badly as you'd expect. That's a lot of adjectives in that one. Are we talking? That's not adjectives, is it? Is it adverbs? I can't even remember the part of speech. I've got to take out my Schoolhouse Rock and remind myself of all of how these things work. I think so, right? All right. Anyway, lolly. Right. Yeah, get your adverbs here. Here we go. I don't remember now. The things that come back to you. Anyway, your breakfast will come back to you when you hear that Lauren Boebert is in the news. And again, at the New Republic, her debate went terribly. It sure looks like bad news for Representative Lauren Boebert this election year. That's good news for us, I think, although it probably only means that Colorado's 4th District will be represented by some other chud that will, I don't know, maybe not make us laugh in the same way, and presumably not treat their dates to Beetlejuice in exactly the same way, but maybe something close. But the story is that Boebert did not receive the warm welcome she was hoping for after switching districts, with her rivals accusing her of being a carpetbagger during the first primary debate. I wonder if she had to look that up. Not sure whether I believe she would know what that was exactly. Not the origins of the word, just what does it mean at all. Boebert, who currently represents the Centennial State's 3rd District, I like that, good twist, announced in December that she would run for election in the 4th instead. The decision comes after she was reelected in 2022 by such a narrow margin that the election nearly went to a recount. Her public image has taken a massive battering in recent months as well, and I think you know what that's about. The far-right congresswoman attempted to defend her decision during the debate Thursday night, saying she made the switch because she wanted a fresh start for her family. That is an interesting twist on things. Usually people say, well, I'm leaving Congress to spend more time with my family. I'm switching districts to, I don't know, give a fresh start buy a new house, I guess. Maybe one without my husband in it, and that's a fresh start. Or I'm going to go to a theater that I haven't been thrown out of, or something like that. Well, I'm not certain what exactly that's supposed to mean. It's gobbledygook. And anyway, let's see. I am here to earn your vote. This is not a coronation, she said. That's a good line. The crops may be different in Colorado's 4th District, but the values are not. Okay. Someone wrote her a good line or two. Her opponents, though, and potential new constituents were having none of it. In an informal straw poll, Boebert ranked 5th out of the 8 candidates, while on stage, none of her opponents said they would support her if they ended up dropping out. It's curious, that phrasing. I don't know whether the question was, maybe they just thought that was too presumptuous at this stage with 8 candidates on stage to say, will you back Lauren Boebert if she wins? Because no one was going to, I don't think, assume that she was going to win. It would be pretty presumptuous to make the other candidates answer that question. So instead they said, well, if it's not you, will you, I don't know, let's see. None of her opponents said they would support her if they end up dropping. I don't know. I guess they must have asked that question as opposed to, well, would you support another one of these other candidates? Like, will you back the eventual nominee? I guess would have been the broader question, but otherwise it doesn't make any sense, I guess, for this story. They must have asked them all, if you would specifically support her. That is really weird. And I guess if you can't turn that into a debate advantage and sweep it after that, when the whole focus is on you, well, then maybe you're dumb. Anyway, at one point, State Representative Mike Lynch asked Boebert, can you give the definition of carpetbagger to me? Which I'm sure he thought was a super clever thing. I said, I don't think she knows what a carpetbagger is. It's a good way to bring the word up. I'm not certain I know that Mike Lynch knows what it is. Maybe that was it. Can you actually give me the definition? Because I don't know it. I'm genuinely interested in what the definition is. Let's see. This isn't the first time Boebert has been labeled an opportunist. Like there was this one time she was watching Beetlejuice and she was like, I think nobody's going to bother me if I, whatever. That was an opportunity she'd want to let go. And she was hanging on tight. to that opportunity. When she announced she was switching districts, State Representative Richard Holtorf also slammed Boebert for carpetbagging. Seat shopping isn't something the voters look kindly upon, Holtorf, another of Boebert's primary opponents, said in a statement. If you can't win in your home, you can't win here. And if you can't keep your hands to yourself in the theater, well, then run for Congress, I guess. Boebert's victory in the 4th District was never a given. She has been struggling with a public image that casts her as a political extremist and an exhibitionist. And she received a humiliating dose of national backlash after she and a date were caught on security cameras talking, using their phones, vaping, and groping each other while seeing a performance of Beetlejuice. But, unfortunately for her, she's not alone in having a candidacy marred by controversy. This was the part, I really wanted to get to this part. This was funny and all, and seeing her struggle is fun. But as it turns out, you put 8 Colorado Republicans on a stage, 6 of them are going to be clowns at minimum. So let's find out what the rest of these clowns are about. Lynch has resigned as State House Minority Leader, did so earlier this week. Is that right? Oh, wow. So fresh in everyone's memory, still shows up, goes to the debate. Why did he resign? After revelations that he was trying to hide a DUI arrest and gun charges from 2022. So some considerable number of the candidates will also have been arrested. Holtorf, who was an anti-abortion politician, recently admitted that of course. I mean, he's a guy, right? He didn't have the abortion. Who did? A girlfriend. He helped a girlfriend pay for an abortion. The procedure, I like this one, helped her, quote, live her best life, he said, which, of course, is probably true. And, I don't know, possibly the very reason that everybody who gets an abortion seeks an abortion. Look, it may be a good thing for me. It may be a bad thing for me in terms of emotions, but it's certainly all about living a best life. And it's interesting that he would choose that terminology given that, what about the baby? Yes, right. Well, that goes out the window when someone I know needs to live their best life. And another candidate, former State Senator Ted Harvey, another 2 first-name person, launched a scam PAC in 2013 that spent 87% of the millions that it raised on supporting operating expenses, a lifestyle PAC. In reality, the organization was set up so its leadership could make massive profits. I'd actually like to read more about that than about what she was up to. I'm always fascinated by people who are able to pull that one off. And I might go looking that up. Ted Harvey and his PAC. Got a Wikipedia entry and a LinkedIn entry if you want to get into partnership with him and think about stealing millions of dollars. I'm wondering if there's a news story about it anywhere that would explain his grift. Well, here's one from the Colorado Sun. Nicolay, I don't know, is that the writer of the, is it an opinion column? Mario Nicolay, I'm giving it a French pronunciation. Bannon co-conspirator Shea is only one Colorado grifter among many, and I imagine that's Timothy Shea, the Castle Rock resident charged with fraud alongside, I guess, Bannon for the We Build the Wall scam. But I'm told by the search engine, which sometimes doesn't work anymore. Here we go. There's mention. Way back in 2013, former state senator Ted Harvey launched the Stop Hillary Super PAC. Along with a cadre of similar organizations, they spent 87% of the millions they raised on operating expenses. That's the catch-all phrase, generally translating to kickbacks via lucrative contracts between the organization and vendors their leadership owns. At first blush, it looks like the group is spending money to accomplish its stated goals. In reality, it is a scheme for those people to make inflated profits off minimal deliverables. I like that. I mean, I'm not supposed to like that business model. I like that definition, though. Let's see. There's a link to the story. Oh, no, it isn't. It's just underlined. This is a scam link. But, all right, well, maybe that those things are archived and they won't let us see them anymore. All right, well, anyway, thanks to Mario Nicolay of the Colorado Sun for, I don't know. They didn't give us too much more insight into that, but we'll take it. It's the best we can do. All right, let's see. Let's get that thing out of here. Oops, why did that superimpose over everything else? I do not know. All right, what else is in pocket? Lauren Boebert's not that important, but I liked the fact that everybody else on the stage had been arrested or been involved in scams as well. A couple more entries in the 14th Amendment argument game. It's happening everywhere. Let's see. We have this interesting sounding entry. Is this Tori Otten too? Tori Otten, come on down. You are also the next contestant on The Price is Right. Is that right? No. Okay. That's wrong. I wonder, how Pocket sometimes in the initial view will pull the wrong author material. But this is the New Republic as well. And I should have guessed that it would be Greg Sargent instead. And so it appears to be, unless he now supervises a column and other writers work within it. I can't tell now whether this is how this is formatted here. Okay, let's see. Well, at any rate, this story, oh boy, there are so many pop-ups in it that I can't tell. There's more pop-ups in it or diversionary subscription material than there is substantive writing, it looks like, about the article. Anyway, neither here nor there. Greg Sargent's Daily Blast vertical over at TNR, now that he's moved over there. Meet the lonely Republicans willing to say it. Trump is disqualified. I liked that headline. And it was teased on social media with there's at least one former Republican governor and Republican National Committee chair who is jumping into the game and saying, yeah, Trump ought to be disqualified, and is even going to join in an amicus brief to the Supreme Court arguing as such. It's Marc Racicot. Does everybody remember him? It's been a while. The one-time RNC chair and former Montana governor who explains why he joined a legal brief declaring Trump ineligible to run for president under the 14th Amendment. And I'm wondering if perhaps, maybe this is just a teaser for what's in the big time full-length newsletter, which has not yet landed in my inbox. We'll talk about that perhaps in the off the air, the business discussion here. Anyway, 3 former Republican governors, it turns out. Marc Racicot of Montana, Christine Todd Whitman of New Jersey. We may have 2 former New Jersey Republican governors on this list before it's all over. And Bill Weld of Massachusetts have all signed on to a legal brief to the Supreme Court arguing that Trump is disqualified from running for president. You know why. Okay, this may be... all right, I see now. It's a link to a sound file of, I don't know, do they call it a podcast? That Greg prepares. I guess he must have interviewed Racicot and asked him about it. We talked with him about what he hopes this will achieve, whether the GOP is to blame for the rise of Trump, yes, and the MAGA movement, yes, and why principled anti-Trump Republican elites are a disappearing species. Okay, so looks all good, and if you want to spend about 30 minutes running through that, I can't not recommend a Greg Sargent interview with Marc Racicot about this. Sounds very interesting. Just sort of wanted to put on, we'll use it this way. I will put it on the record that even former Republican National Committee chairs and elected governors are joining this effort and admitting that Trump doesn't belong on the ballot. Okay, there's other FG, Fascist Guy News, available as well. Let me share this fun headline with you and see if we can figure out what's going on here. Trump throws tantrum over court monitors financial bombshell. You have about 10 seconds to read the headline over at the Daily Beast if you are not a subscriber before they even cover up the headline, which probably is a good hint that you should break down and subscribe to the Daily Beast. But let's see if we have it correct. Jose Pagliari behind this one. We often see his name on this, and Roger Solenberger joining in the reporting. But let's see. Back to Pocket for the substance of the story. Now that the retired federal judge babysitting the Trump Organization has uncovered potential tax fraud at the company, the Trumps responded over the weekend by tasking their own accountant as a monitor that monitors the court monitor. That sounds pretty fun. In an indignant court filing Monday morning, a lawyer for the Trumps for the first time launched an all-out attack on Judge Barbara S. Jones. Do you remember who Barbara Jones is? I mean, I don't know if she's a special master per se, but this is, I guess, in the civil fraud case where Judge, which one are we on? The civil fraud. Angoran overseeing that one and assigning Judge Jones to do sort of the forensic to oversee the forensic accounting side of things and the production of documents and evidence from the banks in this. As I recall, maybe I need to jump back into Pocket and take a look over the last couple of days. But yeah, there's been some really interesting, and it might have been in here that I had read about it, but just interesting developments in the fraud case where they're nearing the close there, and not only are they entering penalty phase, trying to figure out just how much he'll actually have to pay for all of the financial fraud that they've been alleging, but that there is also word that essentially the fraud has continued right up to this date, like while he was under investigation for fraud and having all of his finances monitored to, in the court's words, to ensure that no fraud was continuing. He was actually just kind of caught red-handed continuing that fraud during the trial as well, and that probably doesn't bode well for him. But having been caught, he is now angry. In an indignant court filing on Monday morning, a lawyer for the Trumps for the first time launched an all-out attack on Judge Barbara S. Jones, calling her latest report on the family company an absolute lie, a cheap attempt to justify her government-mandated job, and a last-minute ploy to bolster the New York Attorney General's bank fraud case that just wrapped up. Further oversight is unwarranted, they say, and will only unjustly enrich the monitor as she engages in some Javert-like quest, right? Making reference to the fictional French law enforcement officer in Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, who is defined by his obsessive pursuit and lack of empathy. It's a good point. The Trumps complained about the $2.6 million they've had to pay Jones to do her job, dismissing her findings wholesale. That the monitor now seeks to perpetuate this folly is beyond the pale. Oh, I don't like that one. Wrote Clifford S. Robert, who represents the Trump family. The counterpunch comes just days after Jones revealed a bombshell about former President Donald Trump's finances. In the run-up to the AG's trial against the Trumps for lying about real estate values, New York Supreme Court Justice Arthur F. Engoron ordered that a court monitor watch over the sprawling family company to ensure it doesn't shift or hide assets ahead of a potentially huge judgment that could cripple the business empire. Since then, Jones has issued nearly half a dozen reports indicating that for the most part all is well. That is, until Friday, I guess. We're not particularly afraid of Fridays. It's just that's when the bad news came. That's when she updated Engeron with a report that, as the Daily Beast first reported, no, maybe I was reading that the other day and don't have it handy, suggested that Trump lied for years about a supposed personal loan he made to one of his own companies, sleight of hand that may have allowed him to dodge taxes on nearly $50 million in income. Okay. When I inquired about this loan, I was informed that there are no loan agreements that memorialize this loan, but that it was a loan that was believed to be between Donald J. Trump individually and Chicago Unit Acquisition, one of the LLCs that he forms all the time, for $48 million, she wrote. That tiny footnote made big news Friday afternoon, just as Trump lost his second rape defamation trial and was ordered to pay $83 million to the journalist E. Jean Carroll. The Trump's lawyer pushed back on that report on Monday morning, labeling her assertion a, quote, demonstrable falsehood. Well, court's a great place to demonstrate that things are demonstrably false, but I note that they have not yet been able to do that, and calling into question her ability to do her job. The Trump entities, of course, never said the loan did not exist. Rather, they provided a copy of an internal memorandum reflecting simply that, quote, no liabilities or obligations are outstanding, unquote, under the loan at that time. Robert wrote, sounds kind of Weasley already. The Monitor's deliberate mischaracterization casts further doubt on her competency and veracity. But the apparent proof the Trumps cite for that claim does not confirm that the loan ever existed. Okay, well, that's a real problem then. And perhaps we'll walk our way through the rest of this financial trickery that ends up, or may end up landing him in another round of litigation with the New York Attorney General. We will see, and be back to tell you about it after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. Okay, and widespread praise, by which I mean one person, Mighty OCD, says that the NPR voice is even scarier than Trump. Is that what I was using to introduce joining us now? Yeah, that's a good one. Should I not do that voice? That would be so calming. And then I could just flip the script and give you centrist garbage as well. It's a good way to try to slip that in. Maybe that'll be the voice. Like for old timers who remember, whose voice were we doing? I'm trying to remember now. Oh, I'm blanking on it, but Greg will remember. When we were reading a certain reporter's work and there was objection to, hey, you're just mixing in commentary, some of which is not actually what I wrote in the article. And so we said, all right, well, we'll just read your material in a high falsetto. Does everybody remember this? I remember doing it. I just don't remember whose work it was. But during the next break, perhaps I'll figure it out. If I remember. I probably won't. Okay, maybe one of you will, and you can let me know. I want to go back, though, to the Daily Beast's reporting about what has happened, the latest developments and the latest outburst against Judge Jones, the court monitor in the New York AG's fraud case against the fascist guy. Let's see. There was that weird parsing that was going on. The Trump attorneys saying, well, we didn't say the loan didn't exist. We just said that there was no outstanding obligation under the loan at that time. But even that offer of proof doesn't actually confirm that the loan ever existed. The memo, an unsigned and vague interoffice memorandum sent by the legal department to file last month, describes an entirely different loan arrangement. And that's, I guess, if you cause confusion about those loan arrangements at this point in the middle of your trial for fraud, you're probably going to have some problems. The loan that Trump listed on his presidential financial disclosures was a $48 million loan from Trump's Chicago Unit Acquisition LLC to Trump personally. But this memo now says the loan was from Chicago Unit Acquisition LLC to another entity, another one of his many, many companies, shell companies. This one called 401 Mezz, like mezzanine or mezzo or something, I'm not certain, MEZZ, 401 Mezz Venture LLC. And these are usually not mysteriously named. Chicago Unit Acquisition LLC, when he needs to buy units in a condo building that he's developing, either to, keep them, give them away as gifts, you take them off the market to create scarcity and drive prices up, whatever he's doing with it. That's what that one is for. 401 Mezz Venture LLC, almost certainly, again, either acquiring a property at 401 something street, in whether it's in Chicago, New York, whatever, or sometimes it's actually, he's down to where, as I recall, he would form LLCs to purchase individual units inside of a condo building, such that, Eric's apartment isn't owned by Eric Trump, but rather, 1302 Trump Tower LLC. I don't know where he lives. Things like that. It's, to hide more assets. That's what this whole case is about. Anyway, so on his presidential financial disclosure, they said, okay, Trump got a personal loan from Chicago Unit Acquisition LLC for $48 million. However, this memo that they uncover says that the loan wasn't to Trump personally, but was to another one of his LLCs, one LLC to another. The memo also simply states that the loan is over and done with. It offers no other explanation about whatever happened to the $48 million, right? Normal, and this is the design. If I say if I, a normal person, have gotten a $48 loan, I very rarely get $48 million loans, but if I get a loan for $50 from somebody, and then you ask me, whatever happened to that loan that you took out from that guy? I say it's over and done with. You assume I've paid it back because that's how loans work, and that's what would make a loan over and done with. However, of course, there is another way to get to over and done with. If for whatever reason the person I borrow the money from says, never mind, or you gave me a chicken, or whatever, and I forgive the loan, whatever it is, that loan also is over and done with, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I gave the $50 back. And then, of course, if you own both entities, you can just declare the loan over and done with and not require repayment. I mean, you're supposed to book it somewhere under universally accepted accounting practices, and he doesn't do that, and that's problematic. But you can do that unless, of course, you're doing it fraudulently and not declaring that that's what you're doing. And than accounting for it properly, and then you have problems. So that's all they said. Well, it was over and done with. And isn't that enough for everybody? Apparently not. This shall confirm, some memo in the file says, that as of the date hereof, with respect to the above referenced loan, they're getting all jargony on us, no amounts are due or payable. Such loan is of no force or effect, and no liabilities or obligations are outstanding, it writes. That's like 10 different flags for, no, we didn't pay this loan back. The filing also references a, quote, discussion that Trump Organization counsel Alan Garten had with Jones about this loan, but offers no details about what was said in the conversation. In a phone call with the Daily Beast on Saturday, Garten claimed repeatedly that the loan was between Chicago Unit Acquisitions LLC and Trump personally, not this 401 Mez Venture LLC, and that Trump had loaned the money to the LLC. Which one? Mez? Maybe. I don't know. However, Justice Engoron is likely to view that with suspicion, because why not? He spent years forcing the Trumps to turn over evidence, has seen documented evidence of the billionaire lying about the size of a Trump Tower triplex, has repeatedly deemed their experts and testimony as unreliable at trial. On top of that, the Trump Organization is currently in hot water for faking internal paperwork. Hello, Trump and paperwork, man. Related to its legal work and expenses, the very reason that Trump is facing 34 felony charges from the Manhattan District Attorney over the cover-up of his alleged sexual affair with the porn star Stormy Daniels, a trial set to start in March. I didn't think we were going to that one. The Trumps also fired back against Jones by recruiting their own certified public accountant to back up their claim that she's got it all wrong. One who wrote that based upon my education and experience, my review of the various reports and the express language contained in those reports, not very express, the Monitor did not identify any financial reporting misconduct, suspicious activity, or suspected or actual fraud. How do you like that? So court appointed a sitting judge to review this stuff. She found, hey, look, I found more fraud. And Trump's answer is, well, I'll hire an accountant to say, I didn't find any more fraud. So therefore, there's no more fraud. Well, it's your accountants have been helping you commit the fraud all along. That's a problem. Anyway, but that too might fail to convince the judge. I think they're right about that one, because it came from Jason Flemons, a CPA who lost his credibility when testifying at the recent bank fraud trial. That won't help. Justice Engoron tore into the accountant last month, noting how Flemons had, quote, inexplicably contradicted himself several times and seemed willing to bend over backwards to appease the Trumps. Engoron was annoyed at how Flemons kept providing cover for the Trump family, like when he asserted that basic accounting principles require that an asset's present value reflect discounted future income, but refusing to admit the Trumps broke the rules when they failed to do that. Oh, okay. So I don't really understand the principle offhand, what it is, but I know this. It says you're required to do it, and the Trumps didn't do it. That's not great. So far, the period reports issued by Jones have been muted, failing to reveal much of anything spicy or salacious. The closest they came to that was in November when she caught Trump quietly moving $40 million from the Trump Organization into a personal bank account, apparently to cover a whopping $29 million tax bill. But even that didn't hint at any wrongdoing. But with her latest report, Jones has struck a chord, and the Trumps are quickly scrambling to cut her loose. In the closing pages of his Monday court filing, Robert downplayed her nearly year-long investigation as nothing more than a costly exercise in hunting for minor mistakes that don't amount to anything. And he called her recent findings self-serving hyperbole. The Monitor has thus far been paid over $2.6 million in the past 14 months to uncover 7 immaterial disclosure items, 3 irrelevant inconsistencies, and 5 clerical errors, he wrote. The court, therefore, must and should end this abusive and costly process. But it sounds like even if she didn't catch anything, it's essentially doing the job. Knowing that you are monitored might be keeping you closer to on the up and up than you would otherwise be. So I don't think you're likely to find a sympathetic ear there with Engoron. Okay, let's see. Other fun things to include in today's news roundup. Let me take a look at this one. I thought this might be of some interest. Heading back to the southbound border caravan story, I thought it might be interesting to check in with Jack Goldsmith, writing at Lawfare on this one. Because he usually has an interesting perspective on some of these things. Sometimes we end up having to throw him overboard on some of his analyses. But generally speaking, he'll be tip of the spear for some portion of the right-leaning legal world. This time writing on the Texas border and Insurrection Act reform. That's an interesting topic all by itself. And he writes here, the Texas border imbroglio reveals the need for and challenges of Insurrection Act reform. I didn't really know that was in the offing, but it might be a wise idea. The Insurrection Act, he begins, notoriously confers on the president extraordinarily broad authority to call out the militia or the armed forces. We read about this in the Virginia story recently. To meet, depending on the context, insurrections, rebellions, unlawful obstructions, combinations or assemblages, or domestic violence, all taken, quotes taken from the statute, all based on the president's determination that one of those vague predicates is satisfied and without any time limit. It is a breathtakingly broad emergency power that is urgently in need of reform. Another one of those statutes that was written with the idea in mind that, well, no president's just going to make this stuff up and say, all my enemies are rebels and insurrectionists or, I don't know, terrorists. Kind of something we were worried about happening from the period of about 2000 through 2008 was particularly concerning. And some lingering after effects that worried us a little bit into the beginning of the Obama administration as well. This wasn't a topic of discussion, but it was certainly part of the general discussion with the Obama administration. Hey, there's a lot of things that need reform and nailing down now during a Democratic administration, because the next Republican administration, we don't know who it's going to be at this point, but the very next one, all the history suggests that they're going to just pick up the ball where the last Republican president left it and go ape crap, I guess we would say. Not really. In live conversation, we'd probably use different words. But, yeah, and that was sort of met with, ha, 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 we've got this. Anyway, such reform continues to be widely framed as an anti-Trump initiative due to reports about the former president's plans to use the militia or the armed forces in the homeland if elected. Bob Bauer and I, Jack Goldsmith, argued late last month that this framing is misleading and unhelpful. The Insurrection Act is an important presidential authority, but as currently drafted, it can be abused by presidents of either party. It certainly could. It should be amended now to ensure that every president has adequate but responsibly checked power to meet serious domestic disturbances. You should absolutely 100% be preparing for serious domestic disturbances, no doubt about that. The imbroglio between the federal government and the state of Texas at the Texas border helps demonstrate why Insurrection Act reform should be a bipartisan issue. Except, LOL, no way. I mean, it should be a bipartisan issue, but you know who we're working with here, right? Like, Democrats will be rightly worried that Republicans will abuse it. They may even acknowledge it could be abused by Democrats, so it should be a bipartisan issue. Whereas Republicans will say, the way we think Trump will use it and the way we hope Trump will use it and the way Trump plans to use it does not concern us. We don't believe that is an abuse. So the both sides story doesn't help us. Yes, we believe that Democrats will abuse it when they're in office, but we believe that a Republican use for exactly the same purposes would not constitute an abuse. So we're just not going to be on the same page. It's not going to be a bipartisan issue. Anyway, he continues by saying, after the Supreme Court vacated a ruling by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit that prohibited federal border patrol agents from cutting concertina wire along the Rio Grande, or as it is said in the original, Rio Grande, Texas Governor Greg Abbott directed members of the Texas National Guard and state troopers to continue to install the wire and to prevent federal officials from accessing the relevant area. Abbott on January 23rd suggested that he will continue to defy federal authority to defend Texas from, quote, invasion. And I've seen some interesting legal analysis lately about, all right, no, that's garbage, and there's originalist intent to prove it. I wonder if I pocketed that. Representative Joaquin Castro of Texas, the same day urged President Biden to establish sole federal control of the Texas National Guard. Abbott said on January 26th that if President Biden federalizes the National Guard, he is, quote, prepared, ellipses, to make sure that we will be able to continue, unquote, to build border barriers and, quote, expand our denial of illegal entry into the state of Texas, of which I think there's no actual way to do that. You can't enter Texas illegally. You can enter the United States, presumably, in violation of federal law, but there's no such thing as a way to enter Texas illegally, unless, of course, you deny federal authority and control over the international borders, which is what he's doing. It is too early to know the exact contours of Abbott's defiance of federal authority, whether President Biden will federalize the National Guard or whether the president will decide to deploy the National Guard or the U.S. Armed Forces to meet whatever forms of federal law defiance Abbott might engage in. But one legal basis for some of these presidential actions would be the Insurrection Act. Without taking sides in the conflict between Texas and the federal government, this conflict demonstrates why Insurrection Act reform should be of interest to both parties, and yet won't be. I'll illustrate why it won't be, but Democrats have focused on the Insurrection Act mainly as a fount of potential abuse. I think that's probably true, but it is also a powerful presidential tool to vindicate legitimate federal authority. And many Republicans have seen Insurrection Act reform only through the lens of the anti-Trump framing, without considering how a president wielding it might go too far in ways that politicize the National Guard or the military, or that trample on state interests. The Texas situation should help both sides see the other side. Womp womp, sad trombone for you. It also demonstrates the stakes of reform. Many reform proposals, including mine and Bauer's, propose a time limit on presidential power under the Insurrection Act, subject to approval by Congress. Oh boy. This element of reform is vital to check a president from having limitless power to hail the military into the domestic sphere, but it comes with a serious cost. As Bauer and I wrote, this is where the rubber meets the road, since Congress might not approve the president's continued use of the military. And I'm certain that no Republican Congress would do so for a Democratic president. Whether we would see it in reverse, I don't know. The Texas standoff highlights the profound challenges of reforming the Insurrection Act to bring Congress into the equation to prevent the abuse of domestic emergency military power, while sufficiently empowering the president to maintain order. The challenges are all the greater because they come in a presidential election year at a time when our politics are riven and everyone will be focused on short-term winners and losers instead of the long-term health of the nation. And yet, the current statute is clearly out of whack and giving the president too much dangerous leeway. Insurrection Act reform is devilishly hard, but vital. Well, the vitality of it will almost never overcome the difficulties. But something else to put on your radar and something to keep in mind, a topic to keep an eye on as things progress. All right, let's see. What other things have I put aside here in the last day or so? This was an interesting development in another angle of the fascist guys' cases. CNN Business reporting here. Pro-Trump network OAN, you remember them, the One American News. At this point now we move to calling them Un-American News, Un-American News Network. OAN execs may have engaged in criminal activities, while promoting 2020 election lies, allegedly, or an allegation leveled by the Smartmatic voter machine folks, I guess, in their defamation case. Now going forward. Let's see what the story is here. Marshall Cohen reporting for CNN. In the wake of the 2020 election, the president of the far-right network, we'll just go right ahead and just say Un-American News, sent a potentially explosive email to former Trump campaign lawyer Sidney Powell. Oh boy. With a spreadsheet claiming to contain passwords of employees from the voting technology company Smartmatic, according to court filings. How do you like that for journalistic neutrality? The existence of the spreadsheet was recently disclosed by Smartmatic, which is suing OAN for defamation. CNN pieced together who was involved in the email exchanges by examining court records from 3 separate cases stemming from the 2020 election. Lawyers from Smartmatic told a federal judge that the email and the attached spreadsheet suggest OAN executives, quote, may have engaged in criminal activities, unquote, because they, again, quote, appear to have violated state and federal laws regarding data privacy. The court records don't say how OAN obtained the spreadsheet or whether the supposed Smartmatic passwords were authentic. Nobody from OAN has been charged with any crimes, as of yet anyway, but it came at a time when OAN, Powell, and others in their orbit were aggressively peddling false claims that there was massive voter fraud in 2020 and that Smartmatic was to blame. According to court filings, the supposed passwords were shared around the same time that Powell, her associates, and other Trump supporters were trying to improperly access voting systems across the country to prove their false claims of voter fraud. So they decided that, if this is what I think it is, I love it, right? You're going to send me the passwords of Smartmatic executives so that we can, presumably, I'm sure they thought, we can hack into anything, whether voting machines or at least Smartmatic's own internal email. And of course, we'll find lying around lots of memos saying, let's totally cheat and steal the election, and then we'll have them dead to rights, even if we obtain these things with some shady practices or illegally. Anyway, that's probably what they were after. The January 8th, 2021 email exchange between OAN President Charles Herring and Powell has recently emerged as a flashpoint in Smartmatic's defamation lawsuit against the pro-Trump network. The email isn't public, but Smartmatic revealed some of its contents in a public filing after obtaining the materials in the discovery process. While Smartmatic's public filings didn't identify the sender or recipient of the email, court records from a separate 2020-related lawsuit confirm that Herring and Powell exchanged emails on the same date. The pair's communications about the purported Smartmatic spreadsheet, which have not been previously reported, resurrect questions that have dogged OAN for years regarding its tendency to blur the lines between opinion journalism and brazen political advocacy. Next up, baseless 2020 smears. Well, we know all about those, but just for background, Smartmatic has sued OAN, Powell, and other Trump allies and right-wing outlets seeking billions of dollars in damages for their 2020 election lies. After former President Donald Trump lost the election, they spread baseless claims that election software from Smartmatic and another company flipped millions of votes from Trump to Joe Biden. OAN and Powell are fighting the defamation cases and deny wrongdoing. OAN denies that its executive team may have engaged in criminal activities. We definitely did. They didn't say that. This vague accusation is a clumsy attempt to smear OAN and to divert attention from Smartmatic's own misconduct. OAN lawyer Charles Babcock said in a statement. I mean, that doesn't mean anything, but that's what your lawyer should say about you, I guess. Babcock pointed to federal charges filed against a former top election official from the Philippines who allegedly took bribes from Smartmatic. They both deny those allegations, and they wouldn't be particularly relevant here. Anyway, Powell separately pleaded guilty in October to 6 misdemeanor crimes in Georgia's sweeping election subversion case stemming from her role in the conspiracy to breach voting software in Coffee County. That breach occurred one day before Herring allegedly sent her this spreadsheet. So this is another one of those things that the crazy conspiracy theories that Powell's trying to hatch, but OAN not just reporting on that nonsense and treating it as credible, but trying to contribute to it by saying, I don't know how we came into possession of this, but here's some materials you might be able to use to do another data breach, just like the one that you just did, that eventually will land you in court in Georgia and have you plead guilty to those offenses. Powell and other Trump allies involved in the breaches wanted to examine the systems to corroborate their fraud theories, which she was simultaneously promoting on OAN, as well as on Fox News and Newsmax, despite being told that their claims were baseless. They undertook those efforts after Trump rebuffed wild proposals from Powell and others to sign an executive order directing the military to seize voting machines. Under the Insurrection Act, no doubt. Next up, potential criminal activities. Let's look at those a little more closely. The revelations were surfaced by Smartmatic as part of an effort to convince the judge in its case against OAN that the network is withholding key documents in the discovery process. Discovery from the OAN executive team is critical to establishing actual malice because the OAN executive team may have engaged in criminal activities to further the election fraud claims generally and Smartmatic fraud claims specifically. Smartmatic lawyers wrote in a December court filing that mentioned the spreadsheet. The company's lawyers further alleged that discovery to date has also uncovered that certain members of the OAN executive team appear to have violated state and federal laws regarding data privacy in connection with promoting election fraud claims. Smartmatic's top attorney, Eric Connolly, said in a sworn affidavit that the email exchange with the spreadsheet was among members of the OAN executive team, yes, and an individual who has already pled guilty to crimes relating to the 2020 election. Well, that would probably be Sidney Powell herself. CNN has not independently reviewed the emails or the spreadsheet. It's unclear if the spreadsheet has any connections to the breach in rural Coffee County, which used software from Dominion voting systems, not Smartmatic, in the 2020 election. Herring and an attorney for Powell did not provide a comment for this story. There's considerably more to this, so we'll continue with reading through this after this short top-o-the-hour break. Just a minute before we come back and read more about this fringe far-right network that we're talking about. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on NPR Netroots Radio. All right, just trying out the voice again and relax things, stretch out the ability. I could go 7 hours in this voice, so much easier. But at any rate, let's see. We were in the middle of reading a CNN story about OAN, the Un-American News Network, actively participating, essentially, in the crackpot theories and theorizing between Sidney Powell and her band of lunatics about so-called election fraud. And while she was trying to sell the story on OAN and elsewhere that there was definitely totally electronic voting machine fraud going on with satellites and the Italian army and maybe Venezuela, and et cetera, that all of this was certainly true, I guess, I don't know, to bolster the claims and maybe make the story that much more sensational at some point, OAN gets a hold of a spreadsheet of what it claims are passwords for to what? I'm not sure. From Smartmatic executives and sends it to the lunatic Sidney Powell. OAN, the story continues, has established itself as perhaps the most extreme of the pro-Trump news outlets, and it's a title they're fighting for. And its reporters have sometimes crossed the line into right-wing political, or rather politicking, almost all the time, really. The little-watched network regularly gives airtime to baseless conspiracy theories that support Trump. The channel even worked closely with Russian operatives, oh my, on a propaganda-style documentary during Trump's first impeachment in 2019 over allegations that he pressured Ukraine to investigate his political rivals Does anybody know who his political rivals are? Yeah, it's Joe Biden, that one political rival. One of its correspondents, who's also an attorney, even worked with Trump's legal team to subvert the 2020 elections. Is that Christina Bobb? I think she also is an OAN person, right? And she's also, of course, involved in the Pervolago document thefts as well. Another recent court filing in a related case suggests that Herring's father, OAN founder Robert Herring, later sent the same or a similar spreadsheet to, who's crazy enough to also be a recipient of this? If you guessed notorious spy Mike Flynn, you're probably not wrong, but that's not the one they're thinking of here, so that leaves only pretty much one person crazy enough. MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell, right, who has championed the false claim that Smartmatic and Dominion rigged the 2020 election. They did not. The filing from an ex-Dominion employee says Robert Herring forwarded an email to Lindell that originated from his son Charles and that it contained password information for employees of several voting systems providers. The filing from a defamation case against Lindell said Charles Herring emailed those materials to Lindell in April of 2022. No specific date listed here. An attorney for Lindell didn't respond to CNN's request for comment. The network, the two Herrings, and one of them Red, I'm sure, and some of their on-air personalities are also being sued for defamation by Dominion, which was the target of similar 2020 election lies. OAN settled a defamation suit in September with former Dominion executive Eric Coomer, whose case revealed how the network worked closely with Powell and others to lie about the election. DirecTV has also dropped the far-right network from its lineup, dealing a significant blow to the outlet, hitting the network's viewership and revenue. So just another moving part in all of this, and a good reveal there, right? Well, everybody kind of knew what OAN was about, and it was really a propaganda network propping up Trump and MAGA, and it's made all that much more explicit when we find out not only were they quote unquote covering the news of Trump's claims of election fraud, but they were also attempting to produce evidence to bolster that story, which I guess is just journalistic malpractice on top of everything else, but may also have breached federal and state data privacy laws as well. So we'll see where that one goes. Sounds like it could be fun. Anyway, all right, let's see. Other items for inclusion today. I got to skip over a couple of things that I think are better saved for Fridays or whatever. I also have here, let's see. And by the way, I looked up over the break just to make sure that I remembered it correctly. Whose articles did I used to enjoy reading in that weird high falsetto in order to differentiate between things that had actually been published under this person's name and my commentary? It was David K. Johnston. Everyone remember that? No one remember that? I don't know. He may remember that. I thought it was just impressive that he would find out that we were doing that by listening to the show. So I think we must have mentioned him in one of the social media postings along with the podcast of the show, and he saw his name and said, all right, I'll listen to that. They're reading my article, and then was appalled at my commentary intermingled with his writing, and rightly so. Plus, it gave us a fun way of doing that. And then he came on the show, too, at some point to make his case, not a case against us, but to make his case directly about some of the things he had been writing about. Anyway, let's see. I see some other activity on the social medias that might be of some interest. You know that Greg frequently will bring us pieces by Thomas Zimmer, the historian, who is a frequent writer offline, but also an online thread master, if you will, historian from Georgetown University. And this morning, He is on the topic of the Texas border standoff and has got an extensive thread and formal write-up in his Substack about this. Should I be reading this out of Substack or out of, I don't know. Let's see. We'll bring them both up and see which one is the more complete, perhaps. Sometimes it looks like, wow, it's a long, it's a stem winder in the Substack. We could start by reading the highlights in the Twitter thread, but I guess it's not Twitter. This one I have open in Mastodon. I think he's been on Blue Sky with this one as well. Maybe also Twitter, but I'm not certain that the thread is complete. So maybe I ought to just start and end with Substack. The Texas border standoff is an acute crisis with terrifying implications. How would you like to be terrified before Joan gets here? And then she can be uplifting or, point and laugh or yell at Republicans at the very least. Is this how America ends? Thomas Zimmer wonders. Echoes of nullification crises and civil war and the dissolution of the Union. He's very worried about this, and rightly so. And I'm worried about fitting in this segment, so let's get started. Last Wednesday, on January 24th, Texas Governor Greg Abbott released a remarkable statement that opened with an astonishing line. We didn't read it aloud here on the show yet, did we? The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. Abbott declared that the lawless border policies by the lawless president, Joe Biden, had failed to protect the state of Texas from the invasion of migrants. The governor therefore invoked the state's right of self-defense. Now, Abbott's statement came in reaction to a Supreme Court ruling declaring that federal agents do indeed have the right to remove razor wire Texas has deployed without federal authorization along the Rio Grande border with Mexico. By right to self-defense, Abbott means the right to ignore the decision of the Supreme Court, as well as that of the Federal Appeals Court, and to continue to militarize the border without permission from the federal government, under whose purview immigration and border protection clearly fall. Self-defense means open defiance of the president's authority and nullification of federal law. It's been almost a week since this latest escalation in the border standoff between the federal government and the state of Texas. This should be a massive story. It kind of is, actually. I mean, in our spheres, anyway. And yet, it has not received all that much attention in mainstream media. More on Taylor Swift, I guess, than this. The New York Times, for instance, has barely devoted any focused coverage to it. This is the sign of a deeply disturbing political situation that produces too many fires on too many levels at all times, but also of a political media machine that doesn't have its priorities right. It is admittedly not at all clear where this situation will go. As of right now, it is basically a standoff between Texas, which has the explicit support of 20 other Republican-led states, and the federal government on the ground between federal border patrol agents on the one hand and the Texas National Guard, state troopers, and the Texas Department of Public Safety officials on the other. This might well go back to the Supreme Court again soon. It might escalate on the ground or it might not. But whatever comes next, this is a hugely significant crisis because it captures so much of the conflict that shapes our present. And if it is indicative of what is to come in 2024 and beyond, I see no reason why it wouldn't be. Then it is massively concerning. Next section is how we got here. This situation, which either already is a full-blown constitutional crisis or is rapidly getting there, depending on where exactly one wants to draw the line, has been brewing for almost 3 years. In the Washington Post, Philip Bump provided an excellent timeline of the events, it's linked herein, that got us to where we are today, and I encourage everyone to check out his detailed dissection. As an overview, the story goes something like this. In March of 2021, Abbott announced Operation Lone Star, a broad-scale offensive against the smuggling of people and drugs into Texas, operated by the Texas Department of Public Safety, or DPS. By the summer of 2022, the Department of Justice was investigating Operation Lone Star for alleged civil rights violations, but Governor Abbott remained undeterred. He declared a state of emergency and had razor wire installed along 60 miles of the border without prior federal authorization. As he made clear in March of 2023, he, quote, wasn't asking for permission, even though, and this bears repeating, constitutionally, he really needs to do exactly that, ask for federal permission. In July 2023, Texas began deploying a floating barrier of buoys designed to maim or kill whoever tried to get through the Rio Grande River along a 1,000-foot stretch of the border in Eagle Pass, Texas, an area that had seen a particularly high number of border crossings. Within weeks, the Justice Department sued Texas over this, both on humanitarian grounds as well as because Texas lacked authority for such actions. Soon, the first cases of migrants, including children, getting hurt by the razor wire Texas had installed were documented. In August, the bodies of migrants were found near Eagle Pass. They had drowned. One of the bodies was stuck on the floating barrier. This case made its way through the courts until finally, in December, a federal appeals court ordered Texas to remove the floating barrier. Instead of complying, Abbott announced massive new funds for more border barriers shortly before Christmas and signed a law making it a state crime to illegally cross into Texas, declaring that Texas had a right to apprehend people who do, put them in jail, deport them, make all of these decisions on immigration on its own. Just to be clear how radical a step this is, this law is upending the entire system of how immigration is supposed to work in America. And Texas has announced that the government of the United States does no longer have authority over part of an international border, a border to another country. The next level of escalation was reached on January 11th. Well, I was just thinking, I was wondering if this would be helpful at all for the federal government to exercise eminent domain and say a 1-inch wide swath of southern Texas and the rest of the southern states that share the southern border with Mexico is federalized, and anything that abuts it, whether it's a 1 inch, 1 foot, 1 mile, if they want to just declare that strip of land by eminent domain to be federal land and take it away from Texas and say, it just can't be fortified without our permission, the end. I mean, it's not necessary for them to do in order to exercise control of the border. That should be constitutionally guaranteed anyway. But if they added the property angle to it, I wonder if that would, I wonder whether that would clarify the issues, even though it would probably end with more headaches over the validity of the eminent domain declaration. And we'd be litigating those details for years to come instead of the issue on which they stand on such solid footing. Anyway, let's continue with his write-up of it here. Where did we leave off with this? The next level of escalation, right. January 11th, when Texas state troopers and DPS officials closed down and took control of Shelby Park. That's where the convoy is headed, I think. A 50-acre public park in Eagle Pass along the Rio Grande River, which is what Rio means, but never mind, under the umbrella of a disaster declaration. They have been denying federal agents access to this part of the border ever since. On January 22nd, in a 5-4 vote, and there really shouldn't have been 4 votes for this, the Supreme Court sided with the Biden administration and declared that federal agents were allowed to remove the razor wire at the border that had been deployed without federal authorization. Even though the legal and constitutional arguments advanced by Texas are complete bunk, more on that in a minute, Justices Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh dissented. A remarkable institution, the Supreme Court. And Abbott remained unimpressed, releasing the above-cited statement according to which federal government has no authority to do anything. Next up, neo-Confederate legal theories, and that's the worry here. Mark Joseph Stern had a great breakdown of why the legal and constitutional case Texas is advancing does not hold up to scrutiny. It rests on 2 pillars. The first one is the idea that Texas is being invaded, and that declaring an invasion gives Abbott, as he puts it in his statement, the right to invoke Texas's constitutional authority to defend and protect itself. That authority is the supreme law of the land and supersedes any federal statutes to the contrary. One glaringly obvious problem is that there simply is no invasion. People seeking asylum is very clearly not what the founders had in mind when they used the term invasion. The Constitution envisions a state under attack from an enemy force, needing to defend itself until the federal government, far, far away in Washington, with no standing army at its disposal, was ready to act. That is obviously not the situation today. The idea that states can just unilaterally designate whatever they want, an invasion, if it suits their interests, and thereby circumvent federal authority, is preposterous. It's certainly preposterous that they can declare anything they want to be an invasion, but they can't interpret the self-executing portions of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, with respect to ballot access for certain presidential candidates. That certainly can't square the two of those. Anyway, the second pillar of the argument Texas is making is the so-called compact theory, an idea that has not been entertained by serious people in a long, long time. Before we get to that, one more comment, by the way, on the invasion thing. I'd like to see Mark Joseph Stern's analysis of it, but I've seen some other people focusing on this part of it. It's not an invasion as the founders would have understood it, and it's almost certainly the case. But I mean, even just from a common sense perspective, like an invasion would be, foreign enemies coming across the border with the idea of occupying or annexing or in other ways conquering this territory, as opposed to the idea, like, is it an invasion for essentially the entire potential invasion force to surrender and seek political asylum with the other side? I mean, it's not much of an invasion if they're coming across and saying what we'd like more than anything is to be on your side, not just your side of this line, but Americans. We would love to be American citizens and live here and work here and vote here and contribute to the welfare of the general public here, but you won't let us. That's one thing. But yeah, I mean, if the other side comes to surrender en masse in order to have the right to join our citizenry, or maybe even our armed forces for that matter, not much of an invasion as anyone would understand that. Anyway, the second pillar of the argument was the compact theory, which again says hasn't been entertained by serious people in a long, long time. According to that compact theory, the Constitution is just a contract that entails certain duties that the federal government, and especially the president, has to fulfill. And if those duties are neglected, the states, understood as sovereign entities, are free to disregard federal authority, ignore federal law, and ultimately leave the Union. This is precisely the argument that the slave states used to justify secession. That's what got everybody so worried here. As Mark Joseph Stern succinctly put it with regards to Abbott's statement, this language embraces the Confederacy's conception of the Constitution as a mere compact that states may exit when they feel it has been broken. Honestly, it makes sense for Abbott and today's reactionary right to adopt these neo-Confederate arguments. In a way, they are just explicitly emphasizing the tradition in which their political project stands, as they are once again defying the federal government and deploying states' rights in order to justify inhumane brutality in service of upholding white nationalist domination. Well, there is that. The fact that this argument was resoundingly defeated, politically and on the battlefield, there's really no other way of vindicating it better than that, does not matter to them. Because, of course, precedent doesn't matter. You lost that battle. Well, we'll fight it over again. Well, I guess there's that. I guess if you're going to go to the gun, then there's no reason to respect the legal precedent. The fact that this argument was resoundingly defeated, of course, doesn't matter to them. The Republican Party and the extremist right are all in, even though the Republicans won that war. That's odd. Among the first to announce support for Greg Abbott was Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. 25 Republican governors have since endorsed the position of Texas, pledging their support for Abbott's fight against the federal government, and for the legal theories justifying it. Some are even vowing to send their National Guards, itching to escalate the situation further. That is something Donald Trump would very much like. He has already called on Republican states to deploy their guards to Texas to prevent the entry of illegals and to remove them back across the border. And nothing mobilizes right-wing extremists like a standoff with the federals in service of white domination. Elon Musk even is on Abbott's side, propagating great replacement theories, the barely concealed subtext of this whole thing, by accusing Biden of wanting to bring in immigrants as illegal voters. Sure. And far-right activists have called for a Take Back Our Border rally. What could possibly go wrong? Next up, this isn't just noise, it's a real crisis. The white reactionary assault on multiracial, pluralistic democracy and constitutional government is happening on so many fronts simultaneously, and MAGA America and its leaders are producing so much noise at all times that it's easy to lose sight of how things are connected. Ooh, my specialty, or what I like the most anyway, of what matters and what doesn't. This border conflict matters greatly, and it is greatly concerning for at least three reasons. The first, the lives of real human beings are at stake. Real people are getting hurt at the Texas border. On January 13th, for instance, 3 migrants drowned near Shelby Park, the contested area in Eagle Pass that Texas authorities have seized. 2 of them were children, 8 and 10 years old. As I understand, initial reports that they drowned because Texas kept federal border patrol from helping them turned out to be incorrect. Although it remains true that Border Patrol no longer has access to that area of the river and was definitely not in any position to do anything to help. People seeking asylum are drowning. Families with little children are trying to get through razor wire. Look, it's obviously not just because of Abbott's recent measures that the U.S. immigration regime is inhumane, but this type of militarization and brutalization of the border is the manifestation of a level of cruelty and disregard for the lives of fellow human beings that is simply disgusting, disturbing, and morally outrageous. No one who is okay with this gets to call themselves decent in any way. The second reason, the border plays an enormously important role in the collective right-wing imagination, I would guess, and propagating the idea of a foreign invasion in the form of migrants is a central part of how the right mobilizes its supporters. We will get more of this with ever more extreme versions, especially in a presidential election year. In 2016, the promise to build the wall captured the key role immigration played in Trump's campaign and for his appeal to the base. In 2018, in the run-up to the midterms, the right obsessed over the idea of caravans. Remember that? Yes, of course we do. We keep saying that the convoy is a caravan. But these would be, of course, caravans of dangerous brown people, Central American migrants, approaching the southern border. The doomsday scenario to them, bizarrely, was Germany. The right-wing machine focused on Chancellor Angela Merkel's decision in the summer of 2015 to allow hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees to enter the country, by which she had supposedly allowed the country to be swept away by a wave of dangerous Muslims. Trump even deployed thousands of troops to the southern border shortly before the 2018 election. Scaremongering about an invasion of dangerous non-white people at the border is not something Trump has introduced. It's been a fixture for the far right for decades. And every time some immigration deal to solve whatever problem there might be seems within reach, it's been the radical right sabotaging it. That was the case when the extremist wing of the congressional GOP killed an immigration reform package that had bipartisan support in 2013. And it's the case now, as Trump and his allies are doing everything they can to sink whatever compromise measure might be available. The right is not interested in any public policy solution. They are interested in whipping up fear and anger. They don't want a functioning immigration system. They want to stop all immigration of people who are not white. And they want to get rid of the non-white migrants who are already here. So yes, much of this standoff between the state of Texas and Republican governors around the country and the federal government is about opportunism. Abbott believes he'll benefit from this crisis politically. But underneath the cynicism and opportunism is also a dimension of ideological conviction, a sincerely held worldview in which real America, to the right, is only conceivable as a nation dominated by white Christians. And that nation is under threat from without. Invasion, illegals, caravans. And within, from the left, the socialists, the communists, those liberals who want to destroy everything America is supposed to be, make it into something it must never become. A God-forsaken place of multiracial pluralism. Those who are in charge of the right truly believe that the federal government is dominated by these un-American enemies and that it has conspired against real America since at least the civil rights legislation of the 1960s. Ideology and opportunism reinforcing each other in specific and dangerous ways. Now, there's another section or two, but we are getting to the end of our segment here, and it's about time to welcome Joan McCarter, senior political writer for DailyKos.com, and get to other topics, although this may very well be one of them, because unlike the rest of the mainstream media, by God, Daily Kos is paying pretty close attention to the border crisis and the constitutional crisis arising from it. Well, so I wouldn't be surprised if we want to expand on some of that. Again, Thomas Zimmer's piece is all printed here. If he's not at the end of his threads yet on social media, in his Substack column. I don't know whether he has any chance or any designs on leaving Substack as others have done lately, but we'll be right back to discuss it further. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, well, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, the promised Joan McCarter, senior political writer. I'm putting on the NPR voice to introducing you. It's a new trick we want to introduce here. I realize every week we say, hey, Joan, how you doing? Hey, everybody. And then we just sort of assume everybody knows Joan, and everybody does. But I was wondering, if people were to wander in from the outside to say, oh, maybe I should hear this story told on this podcast, and everybody just says, is this his neighbor, sister? Who is this? Well, come on, everybody. But then, of course, we refer to all the stories you've been writing for Daily Kos, and that should clear things up. But all right. Well, at any rate, everybody does know you. You're here at home. So that's good news.
You do an excellent NPR voice.
Well, I thank you. I've been told it was extremely annoying so far. Worse than Trump, they said.
I'm going to have to work on mine.
Yeah.
To tell the truth, I have never tried to cultivate an NPR voice.
Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty stereotypical, but I guess, I don't know. Maybe it appears that, outwardly, it appears it's the key to success. I don't know whether that's really the case. I think probably large amounts of money and infrastructure are the key to that success. But I guess you get the keys to all of that by having a calm and pleasing demeanor and not worrying
Have
anybody.
you thought about a tote bag for the show?
That's a good idea. I mean, people are constantly toting things they probably wish were surrounded by fabric. I hadn't thought about that. It's a good idea. Yeah, that's always a good one. Tote bags. Other good. I've certainly thought about premiums, and lots of podcasts have got that kind of merchandise. I guess it ultimately came down to this: was I thought myself, do I want this? Like, well, first of all, you should be prepared to have 10,000 of them in your storage unit forever if you ever buy into this thing. But now, of course, you can print them on demand more or less. But I'm thinking about, what would I do? Would I need a coffee mug? First of all, I've got 1 million of them. And, so who cares? Do I want another one? Where would I drink it? I'd be in my house where everybody knows about my podcast. There's no audience there. So could I get you to take your coffee mug with you to Starbucks? No, not large enough to hold a venti latte. So, tote bag, possibly. And then, I don't know, I got to thinking myself, I don't want any of that garbage in my house. So must be the case that nobody else does either.
I think probably the rest of your audience as well has plenty of tote bags.
Yeah. Well, maybe what I need to do is make them specifically reusable shopping bags, because now everybody's kind of into that. So those tote bags were good for very little, generally speaking. I recall them being mostly flat and with, no stand-up bottom to them. Or maybe they improved them over the years, but basically all you could put in there was a book or two. Whatever book you were listening to them review on NPR that week, you could slip in there, and then no one would see what book you were reading, and you would rather have them see that, probably. All right. We'll have to come up with something useful, like, I don't know exactly what, an electric car. So this is a very expensive premium. But drive it around and advertise the show. So I want one of those, not a bag, but yeah.
Maybe a bumper sticker. Start small.
Okay, yeah, that would probably be more affordable. Certainly something like that. All right, so we know how to merchandise the show. We're just not doing it. This is fun. Maybe that's it. The bumper sticker says, "This is too much work" on it. That's all. And you buy one, honestly, it's probably too much work for you to put on your car. Also, no one wants to deface their cars. Anyway, so what stories have you been following these days? Because there's no government shutdown for the next month.
Well, and, as usual, they're doing pretty much nothing to avert a government shutdown.
Oh, no, not that. No, certainly not. But it's not happening because said,
they're too busy.
This is how long we have to wait.
Alejandro Mayorkas.
Oh, yes. Right.
And
an outgrowth of this
fighting over salt taxes.
Oh, okay. That sounds vaguely Roman.
This might be my favorite story emerging this week.
Yeah?
That it was in Punch Bowl, I saw it.
Okay.
Was it? It might have been Politico. The Biden 18 members in New York are ready to use Freedom Caucus tactics, blocking stuff from coming to the House floor because the salt tax is not included in the tax bill they're considering this week.
Okay.
The salt tax is the state and local tax deductions. They want the cap on it raised because they represent more well-to-do people who have higher property taxes.
Yes.
And this has been the thing that has mobilized this small group of problem solvers.
Oh, yeah. Here they are solving things.
Since it was included in the Trump tax bill.
Okay. So, this is the deductibility of state and local taxes, which tend to be higher.
The cap was lowered so that you can deduct less of your state and local taxes burden from your federal taxes.
Right.
They want that hiked back up.
Okay, yeah. So they represent generally the higher tax states where it's more of an issue. And, of course,
New York, California.
Yeah. Republicans say this is why we have no income tax in our states. But okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so where are we with this? They're going to use freedom tactics.
Well,
Freedom Caucus tactics. Okay.
Because way back when Kevin McCarthy decided the way to get the speaker's gavel was to hand the Rules Committee over to the maniacs.
Yeah, sure.
It's coming up under suspension of the rules.
Okay.
This week. It really is a no-brainer bill. It extends the child tax credit, expands it, sort of along the lines of what was done under pandemic relief. Although it's not as generous as it was during pandemic relief, but it does extend it and expand it. And there are also some business tax breaks in there. That was the compromise made in order to get this bipartisan bill done.
Okay.
And the Freedom Caucus hates it because they continue to insist that illegals are going to get the child tax credit, which is a lie.
I'm not certain how they get it. But okay, they
because
don't.
you have to have a social security number in order to file taxes, in order to be eligible for the tax credit.
Yes, sure. I mean, I don't know why that does. Well, it does occur to them. They don't care. All right.
Yes. And then the moderates hate it because of this. Basically, is just an extension of the Republican Civil War. They're going to fight over everything, and they're going to fight with each other over everything.
Oh, their own Civil War.
Whether they're moderate or Freedom Caucus.
Okay. Yeah, we have to differentiate. There's the Republican Civil War, which they're fighting against Biden and the federal government in Texas and elsewhere, and the Republican Civil War that Republicans are fighting among themselves as between MAGA Trumpers and anti-Trumpers and Freedom Caucus people who tend to be Trumpers but aren't necessarily aligned with the regular Trumpers.
Right.
Wow.
Like Chip Roy.
This was a three-way Civil War, that one. Yeah. Okay.
And Chip Roy is
that right? Yeah.
Chip Roy is Chip Roy.
Yeah.
It's really the supposed moderate GOP that's uncomfortable with Trump. They're fine with the Mayorkas impeachment. I mean, before they were saying, well, it would be nice if we went regular order and went through committee.
Yes.
And now that they're going through committee, they don't care that it's not high crimes and misdemeanors. They don't care that it's not a real impeachment. They don't care that even Jonathan Turley says
this is
ridiculous.
What? Yeah, well.
Yeah, Jonathan Turley says there's no there. You can't impeach over this. This is not a valid impeachment.
Oh, wells.
These guys are going to go with Trump on immigration.
Yes, sure. So, yeah, the Mayorkas thing, I was thinking of the impeachment the other days, is sort of like this is Republican members of Congress's version of cosplaying citizens arrests in the localities. They just sort of, we have this sort of, what used to be an archaic provision of the Constitution for removing officers of the federal government, and now we just do it every week. We're going to impeach or threaten to impeach somebody else. But yeah, it's just not even an effort to describe things as high crimes and misdemeanors. Just simply falling back on it is whatever we say it is, and if we have the votes, there you go. It's an impeachment.
And really, that is just a very thin veneer over the whole effort because. Privately they're admitting, not even privately, publicly they're admitting this is sending a message to the Biden administration.
Okay.
They know it's not a valid impeachment. They know they don't really meet the level of that. They're playing politics, which the administration knows and has pointed out in a memo from Department of Homeland Security saying, this is about campaign. This is about the campaign. They don't want to fix the problem. They want to campaign on it.
Sure.
Which we see absolutely in the negotiations over on the Senate side in the House's response to it to actually change border policy. This effort that the Senate has put together, Lankford and Chris Murphy on the Democrat side and Sinema
whatever side, wherever she's standing,
whatever side she's on,
the other corner of the caucus room. Okay,
they have put together what is probably we haven't seen the language yet, but by all indications, it's going to be a pretty harsh bill. Not as harsh as the Republicans want, but biggest concessions Democrats have made with support from the Biden administration on immigration in decades.
Okay. I mean,
so you've got, Mitch McConnell over there saying, and Lindsey Graham, in fact, saying, this is the best we are ever going to get. And we're getting it in an election year. What are you people doing? Those people are saying, no, we don't want to solve this because Donald Trump doesn't want to solve it because he doesn't want Joe Biden to have a win. So it's not going to happen.
Okay.
House Speaker Mike Johnson has admitted that he talks to Trump regularly, like weekly, on immigration stuff. Okay. And he's pretty much ceding that, yes, Trump is giving him his marching orders.
Great.
So, yeah, absolutely. They don't want to solve this issue. They want to run on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it allows the administration to point that out, which in an
Yes.
election year is a good thing. And probably in the long run, it also means that this bill doesn't pass, which is probably also a good thing because it'd be a problem for a lot of Democrats.
Yeah.
They're going to have a
Well,
hard time finding 60 votes in the Senate on both sides. So if it doesn't advance, it isn't necessarily a disaster.
okay, right. It might actually even be a good thing.
Yeah. Except then, of course, you have the problem of where's Ukraine?
Yeah,
This
well,
was
that's
the
an issue.
compromise that was going to allow the Ukraine aid, Israel aid, Taiwan aid
Mm-hmm.
to come to the floor. If Democrats gave on immigration, Republicans would give on that aid bill.
Yes, but they won't.
So now that's up in the air.
That's
There has
tough.
been talk of McConnell wanting to move it separately,
Yeah.
but we haven't seen concrete evidence of that yet.
Yes. I mean, may have to wait for the ultimate defeat of the first attempt before he goes to that emergency plan B. But I mean, he should be able to see that coming. But maybe he just wants. Maybe that's just the last thing he wants to do at the end of the Congress. It may take as much as a year to get around to it, though.
And Ukraine doesn't have a year.
Right.
It's
There's
the
definitely
problem.
that. Especially as now I see the happen to see in the papers that the Hungarian right wing now openly stating, although not Orban's party, but even further to the right from Orban, saying, if Ukraine collapses as an entity, Hungary should lay claim to Western Ukraine. There's
Lord.
There's
I
a
missed
Hungarian minority population there, I guess, and maybe we ought to just redraw that border. I mean, if Ukraine's not using it, we will. Well, okay, but they are, and there are people living there, and they kind of want to remain independent, presumably. But even Orban doesn't endorse that, as it turns out. But maybe he secretly does. Maybe he asked them to open up that front. But that would be a scary prospect. And but I mean, the fact that anybody's even thinking about that, that there's people in Europe looking ahead to, we got to start planning for a world that doesn't have an independent Ukraine in it now. Well, that speaks to the urgency of getting some aid to the Ukrainians, guys.
Yeah, it kind of does.
But if
and it's important to remember too that there is still a majority, majority in Congress, and probably a plurality in Republican members for support for Ukraine.
Yeah. And yet,
but
unable to get this done because there's a group of weirdos that literally take the opposite tack. And for some reason, it just aligns perfectly with Putin's plans, but whatever.
And Donald Trump's plan.
Yeah. And I guess the right-wing party in Hungary as well, already getting excited about that. So, yeah, I mean, and of course, there's no long-term planning for Trump. He's just, I don't know. I'm not certain what the fallout of this is, but I think it'll get me elected or close enough to steal it if I'm not elected.
Right.
So let's do
and
it.
Russia will help me.
Yeah,
again.
Right, sure. Because they're so much less busy now than they were then. That would be the really interesting part for him to get to the brink of re-election and look for the Russians to help push him over the edge, and they just don't show for him. And then he gets mad and resentful of Russia, although who knows what that comes to, because he was going to nuke a hurricane. So maybe you don't want him there.
I forgot about nuking hurricane. Oh, boy.
Yeah. Oh, I just was reminded of it the other day as I was reading they were looting the White House pharmacy and stealing all the opioids and fentanyl and sleep aids and whatnot. And and then and just, coincidentally, that was about the time that he started saying, nuke a hurricane, buy Greenland.
Was that the Sharpie?
Oh, the hurricane was here and not there, right?
The hurricane watch.
Right. Everything, why? What is this guy on drugs? Well,
yes.
Now that you mention it, we thought so from the beginning, but now as it turns out, they're just stealing everything under the sun from the pharmacy. And then I don't know. I didn't mean to steer the conversation to this, but this was an amazing story, up to and
was
including.
An amazing story, and it's just a reflection of how nutso everything is. That didn't make a huge splash.
Yeah, I don't know why that didn't happen
fentanyl.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Even that wasn't emphasized. Everybody was walking away with, well, it was Ambien and Provigil. Well, okay, those two were named. That's true. But it does say in the reporting, fentanyl and oxycodone and, and morphine, for God's sake. I mean, when was the last time people were stealing morphine? World War I? I don't know. Anyway, the idea of the worst drugs in America. We have people specially dispatched to combat this. And yada, yada. And the border this, yada, yada, fentanyl. Actually, a considerable amount of the fentanyl here is being stolen from the basement of the White House by White House employees. And I was told anyone who came within 100 kilometers of fentanyl dropped dead instantly, by the way.
Yeah. What about that?
Yeah. Well, that was obviously never the case. But if it started being the case when they were stealing it, I would have been okay with that. I guess, right? We clear the whole place out. But no, it turns out not to be true. I don't know why that isn't a bigger story. The Washington Post reporting on, I read it again yesterday. They were also, by the way, arranging for free elective surgeries for people at Walter Reed. Like, what? Now I'm curious about, it doesn't specify. Now I got to go get this report. But the Washington Post was reporting on it, or discussion of it in one of their columns, was quoting the report that some ineligible White House employees had somehow been the beneficiary of elective surgeries at Walter Reed. And I don't know who's an eligible employee for elective surgery. I don't even, can the president get a nose job for free? Is that what's happening? I don't know. It doesn't say who it was. My first thought was, didn't Melania mysteriously go to Walter Reed? But she's not an employee, but I don't know. Maybe, who knows? I literally, you got to believe that he was, to me, walking around, Mar-a-Lago telling the people there, you want free plastic surgery? I can hook you up.
Good Lord.
It gets worse.
And this is Ronnie Jackson, who's still in Congress, right?
He's still in Congress, and he was at the White House up through 2018, I think. And
I thought it was a little longer.
Maybe. I don't know. I think my recollection was that he was there to 2018. I had nothing to do with this, even though for some strange reason, dozens of federal doctors in the Federal Health Service call me Candyman for no real reason. Other than I supervised this. I was there when people were looting the White House pharmacy. And, I don't know. Those things concern me. I thought it was bad news when I found out that they were stockpiling all the remdesivir during the pandemic in case any of them actually got this thing they were telling people to go out and catch. That I knew about, but fentanyl, I don't know. I don't know why that's not bigger, but why? It's this question about every single one of his scandals, I guess. Can't tell you.
Scandal fatigue, there's just too much. I don't know. I
guess so. So now I might have to read this report to get the specifics. Although how everybody who's reporting on this thing could read the reports and not, if it tells you who got what specific surgery, I don't see how that's not a headline. Unless it's some unknown person. I don't know. But that was pretty wild. And the goodie bags for people who are leaving the White House. Can you please give me a bag full of Provigil? I'm leaving the White House as a going away present. Wow.
Stephen Colbert actually had an interesting little segment on Provigil.
Oh, okay.
At one point he did a week in Russia when he was, I think it was the Colbert Report.
Okay.
And because of the scheduling, he took Provigil to overcome the jet lag, and because he had to be on the air immediately or start taping immediately when he got there.
That's what they say they were using it for.
He said he didn't understand that you weren't supposed to take it every day. And when he got back home, he thought, okay, I'll just take a shower, crawl into bed, go to sleep, wake up, and
Yeah.
he was up for, I can't remember how many hours, but 5 of it was obsessively singing Ray Charles, You Don't Own Me. Is that the name of the song? You Don't Know Me.
Okay. Oh, all right.
For 5 hours, he could not stop singing the song.
Is that normal?
He ended up naked on the floor in his bathroom singing because he thought something about the cold floor of the bathroom would keep him sane.
Wow. That sounds like a good drug to give the White House staff liberally.
Yes. So
wow.
Absolutely. Go find this clip on Colbert. It's on YouTube.
I will
talking about his experience with Provigil.
Wow.
It's very scary.
Yeah, I guess so. And had I seen it before, I would have known how to pronounce Provigil when I first read this story. But yeah, it's incredible. I had no idea. I just figured, I've heard stories about that for overseas trips, Air Force One jaunts abroad. That maybe even in previous administrations they did this.
That had made a story. That was one of the stories that came out during the Trump administration about Ronnie Jackson. Handing out goodie bags of these drugs on flights.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and I wondered whether that might have been a long-standing practice even, but maybe not. Just him. So, it made a certain amount of sense for people who were maybe
I'm pretty sure that it's been used in previous administrations.
I would think so.
Jet lag.
Right. And I think sleeping pills for the trip, for the actual flight, and then, it's not healthy, but it might be necessary. But
yes.
Yeah. Okay, also, let me have fentanyl and morphine. No. You can't have that. Get out of here. That's not helpful for anyone. I don't know. But, I don't know. Maybe it helps explain some of this behavior. Maybe they've been giving it to the Freedom Caucus. I don't know. But it seems odd. It was a diversion, but it's a big... I can't understand why that's not a larger story, except that, I've said that about so many things. We all have. So, anyway, all right. Well, I think we understand, all the context of the crazy border fight. The impeachment of Mayorkas grows out of that. What should we be expecting? Like actual progress? Are they going to report articles at some point very soon?
Yes, that hearing's today.
Okay.
Pretty much all day in the Homeland Security Committee, and they will report out those articles today. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it will probably come to the floor in the next week, 10 days. Mm-hmm. And the Senate will probably say, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess this is their first chance to decide what to do if they just are like, this is just not a real thing. Do we have to take it up? I guess they still feel bound, but they could wrap it up in an afternoon and just say, well, we're rejecting it. But yeah, I guess they still feel they need to do something with it. And I guess if, somebody's car breaks down or somebody oversleeps in the House, they might not be able to pass it because there's they've only got the barest majority. I imagine there's no Democratic votes for that.
No.
So
they could, Republicans are going to raise some hell about Ted Cruz, J.D. Vance, Rick Scott. Are going to raise hell about it, but a Tulane University professor, Ross Garber, who's a congressional expert apparently, has said on Twitter that if the House impeaches, the Senate has options.
Okay,
it could hold a trial.
Yes,
it could actually, do like it was real. It could just dismiss the articles.
Yes, okay.
Or it could just shove it off to a committee to make it go away.
Yeah.
My guess would be send it to a committee that makes it go away.
Yeah.
That's what I would think would happen with it.
That's an option. I think for non-presidential impeachments, there's precedent for saying they can hold the whole trial in committee if they want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess you could do a presidential one there, but I don't know. But anyway, he's not the president. So, yeah, they could put it there, and I guess they could, I don't know whether they can delay it indefinitely, but they can certainly delay it, bury it, and then say in an afternoon, well, nothing here. We don't recommend to the full Senate that they proceed, for instance. And then the Senate can ratify that later on. So that's a pretty
Professor
good
Garber
answer.
says odds of conviction 0.0%.
Right. Same as Blutarski's GPA, if you remember that. Okay. Very good. Well, all right. That's a preview of things. So the House committee meets today and we'll have an answer as to when they expect to put it on the floor.
And also today, happening right now, a surprise hearing from Jim Jordan in the Judiciary Committee on the constitutionality of Texas ignoring the Supreme Court's order.
Okay.
Well, actually not ignoring the Supreme Court's order. The Supreme Court didn't order Texas to stop putting up razor wire. It said that Border Control could take down the razor wire. So,
right. And they didn't say anything about Texas putting it back up again.
Right.
Okay.
So anyway, we've got Jim Jordan in his Judiciary Committee saying, yeah, Texas can basically secede from the Union on the basis of the border.
Sure, why not? His jacket has seceded from his outfit, so I suppose anything is possible. All right, well, put it in Jim Jordan's hands. He'll straighten things out. Is he jealous at all not doing this impeachment, or did he want nothing to do with it, or I don't know.
He's probably, I don't know. You know, he's off in his own little crazy world, so.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll launch these, the Homeland Security, I guess, handling these hearings, and it'll be rather embarrassing for the Republicans who have to speak, but they know nobody's watching.
You know that there's another 2 weeks in which they're not doing any appropriations.
Right. Okay, so that'll bring us halfway to the next shutdown. Fantastic. I'm already planning this thing out for March, but February will give us opportunities to talk about fentanyl. So good news.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Joan. We'll see you next week.
Edwardsradio.com.
All right.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning.
Right. That's your problem. Okay. Next, you can listen, of course, to Justice Putnam, who brings you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy right here on Netroots Radio. I can't do the NPR voice over the outro music, but stay tuned for instance for all these stories like Alina Habba sending a threatening letter to a judge who has already threatened to lock her up. That should work out great.